Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I'm Scott McMahon, and we're gonna break down today a post that I wrote on X this morning. Kind of provides an overall summary of the various ops that General Michael Flynn has engaged in against Trump and against MAGA, going back to 2016. And a lot of this is the same operation, just packaged differently, slightly differently to different target markets for different purposes. The same operation that he was running in Afghanistan, and before that, even in Iraq, as he was leading military intelligence operations in those military fronts. And now the difference is that now he's doing it against the American public, and he has been. And it came out over the weekend. He posted this, and I'm going to kind of start with where he's going and what's next, and then we'll come back and revisit this again at the end because I think it's really valuable. But let's just jump. Yeah, this is it right here. Let me jump right into it, and we'll let him speak from his own words as to why it is that he doesn't have a role in Trump's administration. Now, you've got to remember that for the last year plus, he's been talking, and everybody around him has been talking about Flynn having a very significant role in Trump's administration. Leading up to the national convention, of course, they were talking about Flynn being the vice president, being his choice. And Ivan Raiklin was posting a Flynn or Trump Flynn meme right up until even after JD Vance had already entered the building in Milwaukee to accept the nomination. And it was so very clear that it was not going to be Flynn, but he was posting that anyways, of course, with the tagline FAFO, which means F around, find out. And that's their favorite slogan, the digital soldiers, FAFO. And one of his attorneys, Sun Tzu, actually said Scott McMahon is about to F around to find out what it means to F around and find out. I guess that was a threat. That was a couple months ago. I haven't found that out yet. I'm still waiting to figure it out to find out. Oh, Ben Moore, Jacksonville, Florida, Sun Tzu. He can't be a very good attorney if he is spending all his time bootlicking for Flynn, but I don't know. Maybe he's great.
All right. Are you going to be part of the Trump administration? What I am doing is I am advising members of the Trump administration right now as they prepare for confirmation or as they prepare to go back into the administration. So I feel like I am a part of it. I'm definitely in touch with people on a daily basis. I actually don't feel.
Just note the word that he keeps saying here is feel. He feels that he's a part of the administration. Oh, the general feels like he's a part of the administration. Is he? Let's hear that again.
For confirmation or as they prepare to go back into the administration. So I feel like I am a part of it. I'm definitely in touch with people on a daily basis. I actually don't feel like I'm not in that mood. I mean, I'm just not in one of those places right now where I think that my bigger impact is right where I'm at, and the ability to be able to sort of be like a striker on a soccer team. A striker on a soccer field can go anywhere on the soccer field, and that's kind of the way I want to be operational right now. I'm helping Tom Homan, myself, and a small team.
Oh, so he's a striker. So he feels like he's a part of the administration. So all of his digital soldiers should really rejoice in that feeling because they really feel like they're a part, even though he's not a part, right? But he really feels like he's a part, and he doesn't feel like he's being left out. So he's definitely a part. He's got the good feelings. He's got the feels, and he's a striker. He's a striker on the soccer team, so he can go where he needs to go. So he's talking to Tom Homan. Let's see who else he's talking to.
Doing the same with Health and Human Services, doing the same with Department of Defense, doing the same with Office of the DNI with Tulsi, doing the same with National Security Council. I've been back and forth with Mike Waltz quite a bit. I'm a big fan of Mike Waltz, known him for a very long time, and others in the administration. So I feel good about where I'm at, and that's
a lot more feelings. He feels good. Good feelings. Good feels.
This is a long game. I'm going to play the long game. I am going to get deeply involved in the 2026 local campaigns, the local, state, and regional campaigns. We got to keep the House, and we got to keep the Senate, and maybe we win a couple of governor races.
Okay, so he does that funny thing with his eyebrows. Where we got to keep it. Is that a tell that when he's telling a fib, when he starts doing the eyebrow bob? I think that eyebrow bob is a tell, or it could be. So he's talking about we got to win, and that's when the eyebrow bob comes in, when he's talking about winning the House and the Senate. Okay, we already have the House and the Senate, and what he did, I think what he's trying to do, he's talking about 26, playing the long game, and I've been saying this even since immediately after the November election, a couple months ago, is that they have their sights set on 26 to repeat the 22 operation, which is to run the strongest radicals that they can, who would never in a million years, especially the swing states, win a general election, and get behind those. And so if we see him doing what he's done in the past, which is endorsing candidates different from the ones that Trump endorses, we'll know that's what he's doing. Trump does not need Flynn to be out there and help to win 2026. In fact, Trump would be much better served, and Republicans in general are much better served when Flynn does not get involved. I can't name a single election that Flynn has gotten involved in where he's actually helped Republicans. Everything that he touches turns to crap, especially when it comes to general election cycle. If any of his candidates, and case in point is Jake Lang. Jake Lang was swinging for the stars, swinging his steel baseball bat, which he was recorded as saying on January 6th, I was swinging for the stars. He's swinging a baseball bat at police officers. He just got pardoned. And what's the first thing he says? He's going to run for office. This is the type of person that Flynn recruits to run for office, because he will never win a general election unless he's in some state. Maybe if he's in the reddest district in Oklahoma, he could win the general election. I don't know where he lives. But if he's in a state that's remotely swingy, or a district, even in a red state, that is where there are a large number of independents without whose vote you can't win the general election, there's no way Jake Lang is winning that general election. And for that reason, he is the perfect and ideal Flynn candidate, because he's crazy and he's far right, or at least he can be branded as being far right. So that's the perfect candidate. And he claims to be a Christian, even better. He came out of his, what was he holding? Was Jake Lang holding when he came out of prison? He was holding his Bible. Because he's a good Christian that was swinging for the stars at the police officers, and there was an act of God, he said, to get him out of prison. So Louis, so good to see you. He says, this is so ridiculous. It is all so ridiculous. And so that's with that, let's go ahead and get in. And this is kind of what inspired me. I'm going to share this video next. This is what inspired me to write that, which is a clip that Red Pill Pusher put out, and he had just the most perfect timing for pushing this out, because it was right on the heels of this, right on the heels of all kinds of talk like, why isn't Flynn having a job in the Trump administration? Maybe Trump doesn't like Flynn. And a lot of people have been waiting for this, as like, okay, well, we'll see what Trump does. If Trump pushes Flynn, if Trump gives Flynn a job, then maybe Flynn's a good guy. Maybe he is who he is. A lot of people have been sitting on the fence waiting to see what Trump would do. And so a lot of people now are saying, maybe Flynn's not a good guy. Maybe he's not who he says he is. And you see, at least a lot of people on X, there's some big accounts even that are raising this. Kat, so good to see you, sister. I'm glad you're here. So all right, so let's look at this. This is a clip from, I think it was 2018 or 19. This is Joy Behar, the beloved Joy Behar, on The View, and we'll just let her speak.
Back to the show.
Breaking news.
Oh my God. Oh, breaking news. ABC News' Brian Ross is reporting Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team and is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians.
Oh, I love Joy's joy, right? It was not sustained very long because this is complete BS. Trump did not direct Flynn to have contact with the Russians. I mean, that's just so absurd. Flynn had been having contact with the Russians since 2013 when he went into the bowels of the GRU, the Russian CIA. Despite the protests of the leadership of our own CIA, he went over to the GRU, their intelligence agency. He went through their security clearances. Nobody knows what he brought with him, or what he discussed. It's all very classified. And even, I don't know if anybody really knows outside of who was in the room there, what he actually talked to the GRU about when he went through all of the Russian security in the basement or wherever they were of the GRU. I talked to somebody that spoke with somebody in the Secretary of State's office, and one of the highest people in the Secretary of State. And he had to go through all of these levels of increasing security in order to get through to meet there. And I'm sure it's the same way with the GRU. And so Flynn did that in 2013. And then in 2000, and he continued having all of these, there are several different points of relation with Putin and with Russia, where he was kind of, what I've described it as, is absorbing upon himself the stain of Russia so he could deposit it on Trump. And so in December of 2015, he was paid $45,000 by the Russian government to have dinner with Putin and to speak with Putin. Jill Stein was there, who then ran, she ran for president as a Democrat or Green Party. I think Green Party is third party candidate. And she sat at the same table there with Flynn and Putin. And then just 2 months later, he's on Trump's campaign. And then the big question, and I'll get to this in a minute, is whether or not his involvement was even deeper. But of course, he took the call with Russian Ambassador Kislyak. He called him on his, I believe, on his iPhone. He ended up calling after talking to Mike Ledeen, who I believe was Flynn's handler, who was also close with Mark Zaid. I've talked about that connection because Mark Zaid was the architect of Trump's impeachment in 2019. Very close also, Mark Zaid is, with the 51 intelligence people that signed off on the letter saying that Hunter Biden laptop story was a fake, and who all just lost their security clearances. But Mark Zaid, I believe, has a security clearance. He's able to, as an attorney, he's able to represent clients whose identity or information relating to their case is confidential. So this is all Mark Zaid. He's a very important part of the whole thing. And Mark Zaid, and part of that is that this whole vision, a lot of the vision for what Flynn ended up doing, I believe actually came from Mark Zaid, or at least it was described by Mark Zaid in March of 2016, right after, just a couple weeks after Flynn joined Trump's presidential campaign, his 2016 campaign. Mark Zaid laid out his vision for the Republican Party, which he said his vision was three parts. First, to fracture the Republican Party, which Flynn has done it very effectively. Second was to split off the far right of the party, which we've seen several iterations of that, most notably in Arizona with the Patriot Party, who all of those people were linked with Flynn, and within the Flynn orbit, I would say. And then the third is to replace the Republican Party with a national security party, which I believe would have happened had Trump been assassinated on July 13th. The national convention would have gone very differently. But so here he is. I'm just going to play this one more time so you can see what it is that she's saying that Flynn is going to do.
Oh, breaking news. ABC News' Brian Ross is reporting Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team.
Okay, so first, he's promising full cooperation to the Mueller team, which means I will give you everything you want as long as you protect me, right? As long as I get amnesty. That's what Flynn is. He's always after number one.
And is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yeah.
And she's so excited about this because that's what they're trying to do. That's what this whole operation has always been about, which is how do we get Trump? How do we pin? How does it doesn't matter how dumb the things that Flynn does, how even borderline illegal they are, of course, always with plausible deniability built in so that he could say, well, I didn't know that was happening or whatever. That wasn't me. That was somebody else. Or, he always has somebody else do his dirty work for him. Right. But it doesn't matter how bad the things are that he's doing, as long as those things can be pinned on Trump. He doesn't care if the media says all kinds of crazy things about Flynn. Flynn doesn't care, as long as they impute that to Trump and say Trump asked him to, or he's doing this for Trump, or he's super close with Trump. And they've always tried to tie him together, tie Flynn and Trump together. And so he's perfectly fine. Flynn is perfectly fine with that. But if you're on the right and you're criticizing Flynn and saying that he is different from Trump, that's when you get threatened to be sued. Patricia says it continues. Yes, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And so that is the same operation right there. This kind of, just like what I described with absorbing the stain upon himself of Putin, depositing it onto Trump. And, for him to suggest that Trump directed Flynn during the campaign to make contact with the Russians, it's absurd. It's just absurd. And of course, if there was anything there, Mueller and his team there would have, and Weissman and all of them, they would have gleefully proven it. But this is just the absurdity of it. All right. So let's get into this post because I break it down here and I think in some pretty helpful detail. And this is, of course, just an overview. I'm just going to read it and we're going to go. I provide a whole bunch of points and I'm going to elaborate on each of those points. So this is the same operation Flynn has been running in different ways since December 2015, when he was paid $45,000 by the Russian government to have dinner with Putin just a couple months before joining Trump's campaign. The FBI's code name for Flynn in 2016 was Crossfire Razor. Flynn knew he was under FBI investigation and kept that information from Trump for at least several weeks until after he was already appointed national security advisor. And that he knew at least as early as November of 2016. And he may have known much sooner. He was actually, from what I'm seeing, as I've been looking into that part of the history, is that he was actually under investigation, possibly much earlier, because of that dinner in 2015. He may have been under investigation even sooner than Crossfire Hurricane even started. And then it was around July that he actually engaged with the Turkish government, and we'll talk more about that. He was under investigation for that. So there were a couple different FBI investigations that were going on Flynn, and he knew about at least one of them by November. He did not tell Trump's team until it was in January 3rd or 4th when he told Trump's team, and he actually told his attorneys. He disclosed that to his attorneys in writing then. Would Trump have chosen Flynn to be the national security advisor had he known that Flynn was under FBI investigation? Personally, I highly doubt it, but that we can only speculate, really. But that was, regardless, I think it's pretty dirty of Flynn to not disclose that immediately, knowing that was going to affect Trump. Okay. So we'll move on. He has no problem. Flynn has no problem acting like a complete lunatic or even bending or breaking the law, with built-in plausible deniability, of course, as long as it can be made to implicate Trump. most of the accusations of Trump by the left are things that Flynn, Stone, et al. Have done. So, the Flynn network. And, so they do these things, they impute them to Trump. And most of, when I've spoken with Democrats, most of their complaints about Trump are things that Trump hasn't actually done, or at least hasn't done directly, or didn't necessarily intend to do, but that Flynn did or drove him to do in various ways. And I'm not just talking. I don't believe that Flynn was the mastermind. For example, in 2020, Trump's campaign was infiltrated heavily by people related to the Kochs. Mike Roman, Mike Pompeo, Bill Barr, Mike Pence. Those people were all have long history with the Kochs, who were very close and really tied to the military industrial complex. And I believe that they were serving the same masters as Flynn. And some of those people, like Mike Roman, ended up working immediately after Biden was inaugurated, ended up working for the America Project, which is Flynn's 501, one of his 501c4s. So, it's interesting to me that these complaints from the left, if it weren't for Flynn, I think a lot more people would like Trump, because so much of the crazed cult behavior, the Christian nationalism, violent rhetoric, demands for retribution, insane conspiracies, so much of that, these insane conspiracy theories, like the military is going to come in and there's going to be these military tribunals, and Trump was still the president all along. He was never not the president. He was the shadow president. Biden was pretending to be president. So many just crazy, absolutely insane conspiracy theories. That's all Flynn Network staples that were designed, in my opinion, to dirty Trump. So here is an outline of some of these operations going back to 2016. So he accepted $530,000 from the Turkish government while working on Trump's 2016 campaign without informing Trump or registering as a foreign agent. And that's a really big deal. I mean, if you're going to be paid by a foreign government to do something on the United States soil, which he was paid to spy on a legal U.S. resident who was a Turkish cleric, who Flynn had previously praised, which is kind of a crazy thing. He had previously praised this guy, this cleric, and then he gets paid $530,000 by Turkey. And then on election day of 2016, he's supposed to be helping Trump with his campaign, right? You'd think that he'd publish something on the Hill on election day that would be in support of Trump, right? But no, what he published on election day in the Hill in 2016 had nothing at all to do with Trump. It was just a hit piece against this cleric. That's all it was. It was a hit piece on the cleric, saying why he was a terrible person and had to be removed. And they actually wanted him to help kidnap and extradite this cleric, which he didn't do, but he did help to spy on them. And, I guess Turkey, did they get what they paid for? I don't know. But he should have very clearly registered as a foreign agent. Flynn had to have known that. He had to have known that. He has attorneys all around him, powerful people that were advising him, even that were members of the Flynn Intel group, where it was his Flynn Intel group that was actually received this payment. And so that whole thing, and that was one of the things that he was under investigation from the FBI. So a couple comments here. Marie Kelly says, "Fight like a Flynn" has a whole new meaning, doesn't it? Well, yeah. Yeah, it does, especially when you consider January 6th and all this stuff. I mean, he's the striker, right? Trump's vaccine. Yeah, exactly. That is one of the We the People says Trump's vaccine. I think you're saying that that's one of the narratives from the Flynn network. Absolutely. They do often refer to the vaccine as Trump's vaccine in order to try to discredit him. I'm expecting to see more of that psyop as we move forward. Absolutely. Yeah, that is. And there was, even last week, there was this whole thing calling accusing Trump of engaging in warp speed 2.0 because he had Oracle's Larry Ellison come out and he was talking about, I talked about this last week, he was talking about doing some sort of an mRNA cancer vaccine at some point in the future, but it wasn't anything like warp speed. They were talking about this primarily as a blood test for early detection of cancer, which I'm all in for early detection of cancer. I think that would save lives objectively. I think that would be a really good thing. And they weren't talking about using mRNA for that. They were talking about using AI to help to do the test somehow. And if it truly does work, I think that would be a good thing. And they're talking, it's what they're talking about, something that would go through clinical trials, I assume. And if people choose to do that, to do an mRNA treatment for cancer, I personally would not be. I have no interest in ever doing an mRNA treatment. But if people want to do that, more power to them. And personally, if I had a blood test for early detection, I would do major lifestyle changes before I did anything like that, using diet, exercise, whatever else to try to cleanse, and other cleansing treatments. I'm sure there's other things, but early detection is a good thing. But anyways, they were talking about this is warp speed 2.0, and that a lot of that was coming from the Flynn network, not all of it. There's so many people that they're trying to create reasons to cause people to dislike Trump and to criticize Trump and all of that, which is a big part of their current operations. Okay, so back to this post. Next, so that was just number 1. And we've got 13, but we'll get through them. Was number 2. So, and this is a big thing that I haven't seen many people talking about, but Sidney Powell, I said, so was Flynn working with Mifsud, who was trying to entrap George Papadopoulos with an offer to sell access to Clinton emails from Russian hackers. And this is really what got George Papadopoulos into trouble, and a whole part of that. And if Flynn was working with him in the time leading up to that, this would be an absolute bombshell. I mean, it would really prove, I don't see any explanation for that apart from Flynn working directly to try to set Trump up. If Flynn was working with Mifsud, that would just be an unbelievably extraordinary red flag about Crossfire Hurricane and Flynn's level of involvement with that. And that's something that Republicans and Democrats should be able to get behind to find out, was, to declassify, as I'll talk about later, to declassify the Mifsud, all the documents related to Mifsud during Crossfire Hurricane. A lot of it has been redacted and held from the public. And is that the reason? And the reason why I believe it could be is because Sidney Powell said in her, it was in one of her discovery requests, she actually indicated that Mifsud was at that dinner, that Russia Today dinner in December of 2015, that Flynn was paid to be at. So Sidney Powell was representing Flynn at that time. How would she have known? I mean, really, there's only 2 ways that she would have known. Either Flynn knew that Mifsud was there, or somebody had tipped Flynn or Sidney Powell off that Mifsud had been there. So if Flynn knew that he was there, how would he have known unless he already knew him? There were hundreds of people at that event. There were a lot, or I assume pictures I've seen, there were a lot of people. There were a lot of tables. And he wasn't at Flynn's table. So how would Flynn have known that Mifsud was there? And then if he was tipped off to it, who, why? I think that there's a lot that we don't know about Crossfire Hurricane. And that in and of itself, to me, is a problem, because Kash Patel did so much research on that, and there's still stuff that was held back. And with Kash Patel's confirmation hearings are coming up, I am all in with Kash. If he reveals who the pipe bomber was, if he commits during these confirmation hearings to reveal who is the pipe bomber, and that's something that the FBI's got to know. That they've got to know that, and they've been withholding it. If they don't know it, they should talk to Ivan Raiklin. Ivan Raiklin claims to know who it was, and they did just release just a couple weeks ago. The FBI released the pipe bomber's alleged height, which is 5'7", and that also happens to be Ivan Raiklin's height. So isn't that interesting? They're both 5'7", and Ivan Raiklin has claimed since March, his first post on X, where he said that he knows his investigation into the pipe bomber. He knows who it was. Ivan Raiklin was also posting on Twitter back at the time, back in December of 2020. Everybody's got to make sure you're there. Bring food, water, and med kits. Why would they need med kits? Why would they need med kits? Were they thinking that was he thinking there might be some sort of a mass injury or casualty event? Because he was planning bombs, or maybe he knew who did. Maybe he knew then. Lots of questions around the pipe bomber, right? Next thing is Mifsud. And then the third thing is we need an investigation into all those who pled the fifth to the original January 6th committee. And it is an implicit admission of guilt to plead the fifth. Flynn, Roger Stone, Robert Patrick Lewis, Jason Sullivan, they all pled the fifth to the committee. And there are others as well, but those are really key figures. I've talked about them in the past, but Flynn especially. We need to know we need an in-depth investigation, very public and transparent investigation into Flynn's role, Roger Stone's role on and leading up to January 6th. And the role of the First Amendment Praetorian, which is Robert Patrick Lewis, was the founder and director of that. And we need an in-depth investigation into their role, and we need to know why the FBI and why the J6 committee did not investigate the First Amendment Praetorian, who was working very closely with the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. And in the time leading up to January 6th. And that's been pretty well documented. There's a lot of investigators on the left that were looking into all of this in depth, and they found a lot of very incriminating stuff towards 1AP and Stone and Flynn and all of them. And they've been talking about that since 2021. And there's a lot of very clear information out there that they knew that all of this was going to happen, and they were to some extent anyways, they were a part of the planning and the execution of it. Okay. So I talked about number 3 is the effort documented in the Joy Behar video, this video from where Flynn is saying that he's going to cooperate with Mueller to show that Trump actually directed him to contact the Russians. That is, it didn't happen, and that's a very clear example, of course, of this operation. Number 4, a network of people close to Flynn systematically deceived Trump and MAGA with lies about machine fraud after the 2020 election. So, and my belief is that there was fraud. Biden did not get 81 million votes, and it was in the mail-in ballots by multitude of different ways, several different methods, and some of it very highly coordinated and planned, I believe, by Mark Elias, Norm Eisen, a lot of those people. Felix Sater, Jason Goodman was talking about how he had mentioned Felix Sater to Flynn himself, and Flynn got very angry and upset at the mention of Felix Sater's name, which is interesting. And Norm Eisen, very interesting. Norm Eisen, I saw, just had Michael Cohen on his podcast, just I think last week, just to whine and gripe about all of the terrible things that Trump is doing. But the machine fraud PSYOP, it was uniform. And this is what it was on. It was on Fox News, Newsweek, all of the media on the right, just in a very coordinated rollout fashion. In the same way that we've seen the mainstream media roll out a narrative, and the Flynn Network in many different times roll out a narrative. They did that. It was a pre-planned rollout narrative right after the 2020 election, that it was in Dominion. It was in the machines. There were these stories about a shootout in Frankfurt, Germany over the servers. And it was actually suggested that Gina Haspel was injured in a shootout trying to defend these servers for the CIA, for these election related servers on the night of the election. And that's part of the reason why they stopped counting. It's just, and of course, there's no evidence that any of that ever happened, any of it. And, there's so many just absurd claims, and it was pre-planned. The HBO produced this, and I'll talk about Shelby Bush in a minute, but Shelby Bush told me on a recorded phone call that she first met the Flynns in 2016 through her military intelligence connections, and then she started working with a former CIA officer on the Kill Chain documentary, which was produced by HBO, and it was about machine fraud. And that was Sidney Powell started talking about that the day, probably even before the election, but after the election, she was just hammering that Kill Chain documentary. Everybody's got to go see the Kill Chain documentary. It was all Democrats that were doing. Amy Klobuchar was involved, and so this was part of, and it was released in 2020. So this was in early 2020, that documentary was. So this is all part of, it suggests to me that this was a pre-planned narrative, a pre-planned event, this whole machine fraud idea. And so and they were very successful. And Flynn, or Trump himself, tweeted about the machines several times in the weeks after the 2020 election, talking about Dominion. It was something I believed it too. I believed that the machines were flipping votes up till in February of 21. A friend and I went to our local township, and we did we paid our township clerk through a FOIA request to do a hand recount of our ballots in our local township. And the hand recount confirmed the tabulator count. I was shocked. I fully believed that we were going to find fraud, that we were going to find something different. And we did not. It pretty much exactly confirmed the tabulator count. I think it was off by a couple votes, but that was probably because of a human error on our count, not by the machines. So, okay. So the machine fraud, that whole psyop there, that was an important part. And then right after that, Flynn himself attempted to persuade Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act based on the claims of machine fraud. And what the document that they were trying to, on December 18th, 2020, they got into the White House and they presented to President Trump a document for him to sign that was written by Christina Bobb. I believe Emily Noonan had something to do with that, and Sidney Powell. And Christina Bobb, who had at that time, I believe she was still an anchor for OAN, One American News Network, which I believe was a military intelligence operation at that point. Jack Posobiec was there, Michelle Malkin, Emerald Robinson. But Christina Bobb, she went to law school. She graduated, I believe, 2008, 2009. Her first job was she was the lead counsel for the U.S. military in Afghanistan, working directly with McChrystal and Flynn. And so, and here she is helping in December 2018, helping to draft this document that would have the Secretary of Defense go into the 7 swing counties, confiscate the ballots and the machines to do a hand recount and investigation. And Trump and all of us would have been absolutely shocked had they done that. We would have, just like what we were told about the Arizona audit, it's going to find the fraud, it's going to reverse the election results, Trump's going to be back in office. And we would have expected absolutely that that hand recount was going to show the fraud. And when it confirmed the tabulator count, because there was a ballot for every vote, and the Democrats had gone to great pains to make sure that there's a ballot for every vote, I fully believe that Trump would have been tried for treason and convicted of treason. And they very likely would have sought the constitutional punishment for treason, which is the death penalty. I really do believe that that's what their plan was with that. And Flynn himself, along with Sidney Powell and Patrick Byrne, were the ones to go into the White House. They were led in by Garrett Ziegler and Emily Noonan, and they were in the West Wing of the White House on December 18th, 2020, trying to persuade Trump to sign this document to invoke the Insurrection Act. And if that's not a setup, I don't know what is. I mean, if that's not clear, just absolutely crystal clear evidence that Flynn was working against Trump, I don't know what is. So, and they don't deny it. I mean, it's very well documented that happened. Everybody knows that is public information. They've said it, they've admitted it perfectly. They tried to spin it in various ways, but that is what happened. The document is out there, and it's shocking. It is really shocking. Shelley says, great work, Scott. Yesterday, I read Out with Flynn and was beside myself on General Flynn lies. Wow. And that's, Out with Flynn is a chapter from, I don't know, somewhere. I don't think I have it on my desk right now. Oh, of course, I just dropped my coffee looking for it. Here it is. I do have it. Keith Kellogg's book, War by Other Means. It was just buried under paperwork. Spilled coffee. Oh, don't cry over spilled coffee, right? I think that's an old Chinese proverb. I don't think it's in the Bible, though. Not that one. Okay, so let's move on here. Now, of course, my mouse is acting funny. There we go. I'm back. All right. So the next one is number 6. Flynn and Stone ran the insurgent leadership over the groups that incited violence on January 6th. So I've been talking now for the last few weeks about January 6th and how there was clear coordination between the military, Milley, Charles Flynn, Mike Flynn's brother, and General Piatt were there's several whistleblowers that have come forward to Congress, testifying to Congress, of course, under potential penalty of perjury, that it was Piatt and Flynn who said that it was going to be bad optics for if the National Guard actually showed up and did what Trump asked, which was for 10,000 National Guardsmen to show up on January 6th. And that was the biggest thing. Had that happened, had there been 10,000 National Guardsmen on that day, then none of the rest of the stuff that happened on January 6th would have happened. And so there's the military. And Nancy Pelosi was in communication and coordination with them. And she actually denied it based on the DOD saying that the DOD said it's a bad idea, so we're not going to do it. That was her justification. And then we have the Department of the Interior that made it possible broke their own rules, the National Park Service rules, to give the permit to Caroline Wren and Amy and Kylie Kramer for the stage that day to be on the ellipse. Had they followed their own rules, the stage would have been at Freedom Plaza, where Cindy Chafin had requested the permit. And she was really entitled to that permit according to the rules. But instead, it was apparently someone high up in the Department of the Interior, and I talked about this a week and a half ago, someone high up within the Department of Interior, probably, I believe, it was likely to be Liz Cheney, who I believe that Kylie and Amy Kramer have a relationship with, and or at least had one at that time. And so that even further implicates Liz Cheney as investigating herself as she was running the J6 investigation. And there were Jason Funez's testimony to the J6 committee is very, very interesting. At the end of it, he talks about the permit. And as soon as he brings up the permit and brings up Cindy Chafian, a redacted member of the J6 committee says, we need to go off the record now. And so they actually went off the record. And so they went off the record, and we don't know exactly what they talked about. So, was that Liz Cheney, and was she trying to control the narrative there or trying to conceal her own involvement? I think that's a very likely possibility. So we got the Department of Defense, we got Department of the Interior, we've got the Department of Justice, we've got the FBI. According to Clay Higgins, there were over 200 FBI informants or assets or agents that were dressed as Trump supporters on January 6th. How many of those were part of the Flynn network? And then with all of that, and then we of course had the Department of Justice having a very coordinated and deliberate, intentional seeming investigation into January 6th immediately afterwards. And they also needed people kind of like leadership within the MAGA movement on the ground, boots on the ground, leading up to that time, as far as shaping narratives. And Flynn was really a central aspect of that. There were all these Flynn orgs that came together. Flynn was close with the Proud Boys, with the Oath Keepers, and then First Amendment Praetorian was very much involved in that, kind of outreach and communication, because they were the same kinds of people, and they had this call that I talked about that Stacey Burke recorded that was with Jason Sullivan, who had been Roger Stone's social media guru guy, had worked very closely with Roger Stone. And Jason Sullivan was talking about, we have to, on December 30th, 2020, a week before January 6th, we have to go inside the Capitol. We've got to breathe down the legislators' necks. We have to raise the shout of Jericho inside the Capitol, inside the halls of Congress. And, all of that is really clear evidence of, a setup. And it was all the Flynn orgs that they were talking about. And Flynn and Jason was talking there about how he was, he was directed by Trump to do this, which he wasn't. So, there's quite a bit there. They needed somebody inside, and it was Flynn, Stone, the Stop the Steal. Stone was behind the Stop the Steal rally. All of that energy leading up to it, promoting narratives that would incite and be dog whistles and that kind of thing to incite violence on that day, to move people to act in the way that they did, that some of them did on January 6th. So all that, they pled the fifth, and they need to be investigated. Okay, so number 7, Flynn and the America Project were behind the Arizona audit that I believe was designed to fail. And I could talk about that in depth. I'll just say one thing right now is that according to the rules for the Arizona audit, it was against the rules. It specifically and explicitly stated in the rules for the Arizona audit that the workers that were handling the ballots were not allowed to wear gloves. So let that sink in. The workers for the Arizona audit, according to the rules, were specifically not allowed to wear gloves while handling the ballots. And Stacey Burke actually filed a lawsuit trying to stop the Arizona audit based on that. Because she said, clearly it's designed to fail. And I think that and that's just one piece, one component of it. But I definitely believe that it was designed to fail. Okay. So All right. So number 8, Flynn and the America Project were driving forces with Steve Bannon's help in the precinct strategy to take over and destroy state Republican parties, running far-right candidates in 2022 who could not possibly win the general election. So I kind of talked about that earlier, and I think that's that's definitely a big piece of this. And in fact, the Arizona audit was kind of like the convention of sorts. It was the meeting place for the operatives within the various state parties. There's so many of them that met there, and they were kind of built up and charged and trained to some extent there in Arizona during the audit. It was kind of like a mecca that all of these Flynn Network clowns really and operatives went to. It went in order to be built up and presented to the world as experts, and that was a big part of the setup within state Republican parties. Number 9, Flynn and the America Project were behind the machine fraud psyop in 2022, which dramatically depressed GOP turnout because it's all rigged. So what's the point? And that was a huge aspect of 2022. So many people. I think that the reason there are several reasons why it was supposed to be a red wave in 2022, but instead it was a red trickle. And the biggest reason, I think Flynn deserves more blame than anyone for that. I think he and Steve Bannon, but especially Flynn, because they had taken over the election integrity movement. They'd making it all about machines and all about just it's all rigged. So what's the point? It was a movement. The narratives that they were putting out were really designed to depress voters and discourage voters, and a specific target, a specific section of segment of voters, which is the Republican voters. It really targeted Republican voters specifically. It wasn't Democrat voters that were discouraged about machine fraud and election fraud in general. It was Republican voters that listened to all the Flynn Network podcasters and influencers. And that had a huge effect. The other thing was that they ran just ridiculous candidates like Christina Caramo, who ran for Secretary of State, and I talked about how she was talking about how yoga pants are demonic to a group of like middle class white women voters in Michigan that were like a key segment of the population that was kind of on the fence about Republicans in general in 2022. And she's just going off and talking about demonic energy and yoga pants are demonic. This is ridiculous. This is not how a candidate should ever behave in the run up to the general election. All right, number 10, Flynn had enough control over state GOP delegations to take control over the national convention from the floor. So that this is in this year in 2024. And I reported on that at length, even starting in February of 24. So I broke on June 4th, 2024, that Shelby Bush led a training session on how to initiate a floor fight to take over the national convention on primetime television and place a new candidate into nomination. And my reporting was later confirmed by Trump's team, and that did their own investigation, and Washington Post actually ran a story, and I spoke with the reporter on that, that it confirmed my reporting, and they did not mention me in the Washington Post article, which it didn't matter to me. I was just happy that the story was getting out and they were coming to the same exact conclusions that I'd come to, and that more and more people were seeing it. And because at the time, especially, I had a very small audience. So, and I still do, but I was a lot smaller. I was even smaller then. So, and that was a big deal. I mean, this was a group of Flynn operatives and Shelby Bush. She had admitted to me that she met the Flynns in 2016. She had been working very closely with Mike Flynn, especially since 2020. And she's received over $700,000 from the America Project, Patrick Byrne, Mike Lindell, and her PAC has. And so, it's proven, like, she is very close with Flynn, and here she is running a training session on how to suspend the rules from the floor of the convention and take over the convention by doing so, and place a new candidate into nomination. And they were saying, well, this is to protect Trump. We're doing this to protect Trump. But of course, there's nothing about placing a new candidate into nomination that could protect Trump. They created a fake boogeyman saying that the establishment was going to try to take over the convention and replace Trump with Nikki Haley on the floor. And Mike Gill was getting into that too and went into Arizona over that. And yeah, I knew it was all fake. I talked to people, I was talking to people in state parties all across the country, even in Vermont. I have contacts there in Vermont, and which is the one state that Nikki Haley actually won the primary in. And they said, no, Trump is the nominee. There's nobody else that has any energy at all. Nobody else is it's just not going to happen. I talked to people in the RNC, all over the country. It was not going to happen. And so, because I was trying to figure out, like, why are they even doing this? And none of that made sense until July 13th, 2 days before the national convention was scheduled to start, and President Trump was shot in the face. I don't know if Flynn had knowledge of that in advance. I can't know that. I can't know what he knew. But he was talking about Trump being assassinated for a year and a half before it happened. They were definitely running a campaign, a contingency campaign for Flynn for president, 100% without a doubt. Roger Stone had made public comments about that. I have spoken to two people who were directly party to conversations in Flynn's inner circle about that, going back to 2021. As early as 2021, Flynn and Roger Stone were talking about running Flynn for president if something happened to Trump or if Trump didn't win. It didn't run. And there's others as well, and at their home base in Florida, they were actively talking about running a campaign even a year ago, even during the primary season, that Flynn was going to be president. And he wasn't on the ballot for the primary. How could they be talking about Flynn becoming president unless they knew something was going to happen to Trump? This is a big deal. Let that sink in. It was a really, really big deal. They were planning on replacing Trump had something happened to Trump, and they had the ability. They'd been planning this and working on it since 2021 with the precinct strategy, with Steve Bannon's help, and with the help of operatives throughout the country. The Arizona audit was a central planning vehicle for that whole operation, and a big objective of the operation was to make Flynn the president had something happen to Trump. And they had the delegations. They had control over enough delegations to be able to do it. And I think that they would have run a Flynn Haley ticket that would have been presented as a unification ticket, because they keep harping on this idea that's a total fake idea, that the conflict within state Republican parties is the grassroots versus the establishment. And that's not the problem. That's not the conflict. The conflict is there's an insurgency of fake anti-Republicans who are trying to destroy the party versus the Republicans who are within the party, who know how to get things done. They know how to run campaigns, assist candidates, and win elections. And there's all these new people that think that there's all this power in the party, and all they have to do is they're told that they just have to go to a couple meetings, maybe a meeting every month or a couple meetings a year, and vote the way they're told to do. They'll get we'll train you. We'll be, of course, they'll be the gatekeepers. We'll give you the training and the information you need in order to succeed. And then you'll help save the state and save the country for future generations. That was the pitch. That's the precinct strategy pitch. And it's fake, because it's not a position of rights and power. It's a position of responsibility and work. It takes a lot of work, and that's what the position is. And it's not what they said. And a big part of the purpose of all of that was to make Flynn the president. And that would have accomplished what Mark Zaid was talking about back in March of 2016, when he said The third step of his plan, the first step was to fracture the Republican Party, split off the far right of the party to form its own party. And the third was to replace the Republican Party with a new national security party, because that Flynn Haley ticket would have been 100% more than the Bushes, more than Obama, more than Biden. It would have been the military industrial complex. And it would have brought about World War III. I'm certain of it. Well, that's just my opinion. Encourage you to come to your own conclusions. So, all right. So let's move on. Number 12, Flynn rewarded, and this is big. So in this happened right before this started happening, around that same time in June. June is when Flynn had this, or Ivan Raiklin had this viral video, where it was a chance meeting with Zoe Chase from NPR and from This American Life, and he where he told her that his plan, he told the world his plan for vigilante citizen retribution, that they were going to go on live stream swatting raids, armed swatting raids, 5 o'clock in the morning, using the precedent that had already been set against people like Flynn and Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, and even Ashley Babbitt, who was shot in cold blood, of course. And so those are precedents that the left has set. So now that gives them somehow, in his mind, in Ivan Raiklin's mind, because he's, after all, he says he's a constitutional lawyer, right? So he knows the Constitution. So if apparently an eye for an eye is in the Constitution, and it's certainly in Leviticus, so he says that makes him a Christian. I mean, this is just bonkers. Everything about it is absurd. But he's calling for this whole idea, and he has a lot of people that follow him and that just love him, and they think that he's the bee's knees, and that everything he says is true, and that that it's legal even for citizens to be, maybe if they're deputized by their sheriffs, to actually go on live swatting raids of his deep state target list, because they say that they're bad. So the people can be judge, jury, and executioner. And this is very aligned with Tactical Civics, which advocates for citizen grand juries and citizen militias in each county. And it's just a mess. But that is what Ivan Raiklin is doing. And Flynn rewarded him just days after his viral video. He rewarded him, giving a directorship on a seat on the board of directors of America's Future. It's a paid position there, and ramping up his podcast, and providing all kinds of support to Ivan Raiklin, and just big rewards for him going viral. And Flynn even called it right away. He says every American needs to watch this video, which is a video of Ivan Raiklin calling for these live stream swatting raids of his deep state target list. Okay, so, but that fit into something bigger. It was a bigger, this is, like I said, I mentioned Tactical Civics, which Ann Vandersteel is a part of. There's the Napalm Militia, the Jake Lang and Ann Vandersteel and Stu Peters founded, and others within the Flynn network. There are, Oath Keepers was ramping back up. There were other militias that they were working with. There was Joe Altman and David Clements going around doing this Gideon 300 training, and where they were actually teaching people to doing Antifa de-arrest drills, and teaching people to go into their local commissioners and demand that they get rid of the machines or else. And this was something, and the Hand Count Roadshow was another part of this. Flynn was telling everybody that there was going to be some sort of a major power outage or an EMP attack or something before the election, that China was going to attack us, or they were even going to attack us, a military attack on our own soil. Something was going to happen, so that we would need people who know how to hand count ballots. And so Mark Cook was traveling around the country teaching people how to hand count ballots. and instead of getting out the vote, instead of helping to actually support Trump's campaign and volunteering with Trump Force 47, they were telling their people that what they needed to do, the most important thing for them to do, was to learn how to hand count ballots. And of course, with hindsight, at the time, I knew that it was ridiculous. I was telling everybody that would listen that was ridiculous. It's not going to, like, Flynn's lying. They're trying to cause Trump to lose. And so what I said here, number 13, Flynn's entire network was encouraging citizen militia involvement in the event of a 2024 Trump loss, which is absolutely true. They were in so many different ways encouraging citizen militia involvement, saying that if Trump lost, that it was going to be election fraud all over again, 2020 all over again. But at the same time, they were encouraging that loss with continuous narratives meant to inspire hopelessness. It's all rigged, so what's the point? Discouragement of early voting. And this combination of events would have provided a Kamala Harris administration with the justification to strip law-abiding citizens of their firearms, and would have resulted in the end of our Bill of Rights, our final end, I believe. And I think that that's what they were going for. I mean, looking at their narratives at the time, that's what they were doing to all of us. And so in the backdrop of all of that, I was studying as it was happening, I was looking at this, and many of you were as well. And we were trying to just warn people, like, this is not good. What is happening? Flynn is clearly showing himself to be the enemy of Trump and the enemy of MAGA. And at the same time, the whole Flynn world was going all in, saying Flynn's going to be the vice president. Flynn's going to be, he's going to be the Secretary of Defense. And even Kash Patel said he'll be the director of the CIA. I think that's what he said at a Reawaken Tour event. If Flynn is the Secretary of Defense, even Kash Patel said that. And so with that, we have Kash Patel, who is frequently on the Reawaken Tour, who wrote a very strong defense of Flynn and his actions during the 2016 Trump campaign. He wrote a very strong defense in his book, Government Gangsters, which I also have right here. And I won't spill the rest of my coffee as I'm pulling it up, but I also have that book right here. In that book, chapter 12 is all about Flynn, and it's basically the outline of the Flynn movie. It's just completely licking his boots and talking about how great he is and how, he was a victim hero, and it was, and covering up the things that Flynn had actually done that hurt Trump during Trump's campaign. And so we need a commitment from Kash. We need a commitment from Kash Patel. I think these three things I'm really hoping and praying that senators on the Democrat and Republican senators very directly ask him to, number one, identify and indict the pipe bomber, the J6 pipe bomber. We need to know who it was, identify the person, indict them. Will he do that? Number two, release and unredact all the MIFSUD documents. So there's a whole lot there with MIFSUD. And do I know that it's going to implicate Flynn? No, I don't. But it seems highly likely that at least it's going to give us some really good information about how this was all set up and coordinated. And I think it's pretty likely. I'm not willing to stake my reputation on it, but from what I'm seeing, I've got strong questions, and I think we need to know. And that's something that right-end Democrats and Republicans should want. That we should want to know about those MIFSUD documents and who was having conversations with MIFSUD. He had two different phones that were given to him. And who gave him those phones? Did Flynn give him those phones? Did somebody in our government give him those phones? Where did he get those phones? That's a key part to understanding. And it's shocking to me that did not come out in Kash's book or in his investigation. Number three, investigate the January 6th involvement of all those who pled the Fifth Amendment to the J6 committee. So that includes General Flynn, Roger Stone, Jason Sullivan, and Robert Patrick Lewis, and others. Their involvement, I believe, is really key, and it needs to be investigated along with, there's plenty of bad actors on the left. But this narrative that all the bad actors in J6, all the bad actors in Crossfire Hurricane, the Russia collusion stuff, that they're all on the left. I think that is a complete lie. And I think to some extent, Trump himself has actually bought that. And I just, there are a lot of bad actors on our sides. There's been an insurgency on our side, and that insurgency needs to be identified and rooted out. And so, and if Cash is going to cover for that insurgency, then he's not the right man for the job. So, and I'm hopeful that he won't. I'm hopeful that he will actually expose these things. And if the Senate, now's the time, I'd suggest that you contact your senator, if they're your senators, whether Democrat or Republicans, and tell them, look, they should be very interested in asking questions about Kash Patel, especially if they're on the Intelligence Committee. So, encourage them, and encourage those even who aren't your senators who are on the Intelligence Committee. Encourage them to look into pipe bomber, MIFSID documents, and the involvement in J6 of those who pled the fifth into the J6 committee. I think that's something that should be something that Democrats and Republicans can get behind, and that I would love to see that be a unifying kind of thing. And I think it could be. So that there's a lot there. And I summarized all that in, so you can read this. I will put the post in the show notes on my Substack, and I appreciate you subscribing to me there. I am going to be compiling this and much more. I've got some stories that have not been told that need to be told, and I think they go. There's in all my research, it's this process of like drilling into the details and doing deep dive into just tremendous detail, but then coming back up for air and trying to see the whole picture. And there's so much detail that is just so shocking, and it's so much shocking detail. And I often say it's shocking but not surprising, right? Because it all kind of fits into the same pattern. And so I think that it's all he tweets too much. I think you're talking about Ivan Raiklin. I just want to get caught up a little bit. Benghazi boomerang inbound. Yeah, I'm sure Benghazi has something to do with that. So Shelley, really, Kash Patel wrote a section on Flynn's innocence. And it's a full-throated defense of Flynn. And so I'm pretty sure it's chapter 12 in Government Gangsters. Bradley, thank you so much. He says, great job of breaking it down. And Colin says, Obama got caught tapping Trump's 26th floor skiff in 2016. Yeah. And I mean, it's clearly Obama and the FBI, you've got Comey, you've got Clapper, you've got Strzok and Page. There were a lot of bad guys that we all know about, right? But were there also bad guys on the right? And all those bad guys are on the left. And were there also bad guys on the right? Were there insurgents? And an even bigger question is, if there are details that Kash has been involved in preventing from coming to the public and coming to light that would implicate people like Flynn, what does that say? Like, why he kind of went from, he was working at the DOJ under Obama. He was a special prosecutor under Obama in the DOJ at the end of Obama's administration, while all this stuff was going on. Was he involved in that in some way? I don't know. Is that the reason why Devin Nunes chose him? Devin Nunes was on the House Intelligence Committee. Was Devin Nunes privy to what was going on as it was going on? Was he in a position that he could have stopped it? I don't know. So those are things that we need to find out about. So that is that is what I've got for today. I want to thank you all, and I'm going to be putting this out in what I've decided is I'm going to start writing this out as a book. I'm going to spend more time writing, a little less time preparing for podcasts, and start putting this out in a book form. And I'm going to be publishing it for my subscribers on my Substack only. Once I've got enough engagement, apparently X, I wanted to do a subscriber thing on X, but you have to have 5 million engagements over the last 3 months in order to qualify to do that. I don't have that yet. So, so maybe that'll happen soon, but in the meantime, I'm going to do it only on my Substack for my subscribers. And we're going to, I'm going to just kind of release one chapter at a time as I'm writing it to my subscribers. So I'll have executive summaries out for the public, but that's how I'm going to start working on getting this book out. And or it might end up being a series of books. There's a lot of stories that I have to tell, a lot of individual stories that all tell part of this bigger story, that even with what I've talked about, everything that I've shared in the last hour and 15 minutes, that's just a piece of what has actually happened. There are so many aspects to the story, and the human cost to these military intelligence operations deployed against Americans is just so great. And it's something that we need to share, and we really need to expose. So yeah, thank you all for your comments and for your interest and your support, and do subscribe for $5 a month. I think it's a bargain. You're going to get some really good information, and I'm going to be spending a lot more time on the Substack in the weeks and months ahead as I put this together. And you'll be the first to know a lot of these stories that there are some really big ones that I will be breaking only to my subscribers there. And I'll be doing executives and summaries and stuff. And I'll still be on X. So I think I'm too addicted to X. I don't think I can get off X, but also I enjoy connecting with all of you. So thank you all. And until Wednesday, I'll have my members only podcast on Wednesday. We'll see you then. Bye.